Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 6 of season 2 of Arrow called Keep Your Enemies Close. And guys, this is another really good episode. I think it's one of the strongest of the season so far. Now this review might be a little bit shorter than normal. I'm still battling a sore throat. I think I'm almost over it, but still. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, let's get into things. First, let's kind of cross the small potatoes off the list. This whole situation with Thea and Roy. Honestly, this just seemed like this was basically just filler. It was honestly it just really seemed like a complete waste of time. And I love how Roy is just like, why didn't you talk to me about this? And of course, there is no really good reason Thea couldn't have said, Roy, I'm really sorry, but I think it might be a good idea for us to take a break. Officially, publicly take a break. Just in case that this might reflect poorly on my mom's case. You think Roy's going to have a huge problem with that? I think he's going to have more of a problem of Thea breaking up with him for a BS reason and then lying to him about it. I imagine Roy would have probably been quite understanding if Thea had just been honest with him. Honestly, I think really the only real payoff of that whole scene is that, one, it gets us to see Moira and Roy interact for the first time. Moira gets, of course, another really cool scene to remind us that, hey, Moira is actually a pretty awesome mom. And, of course, the whole thing with Roy getting arrested, we get to see him with his red hoodie pulled up, sort of obviously foreshadowing Roy's ultimate destiny of becoming Red Arrow someday. And, of course, this also gets him in a situation where Officer Lance and he realize that they are both allies, shall we say, of the Vigilante, which is certainly interesting. Although I think Officer Lance was unnecessarily dickish with Roy, given that, he's actually made a genuine effort to clean up his life lately and has been doing, Roy's been out there doing good. Let's leave it at that. Of course, to be completely fair, Quentin Lance doesn't know that, but still, man. Yeah, that was a little unnecessary, Officer Lance. Okay, also, we have appearance this episode by Amanda Waller. Okay, now, I know some people are upset that Amanda Waller in the comics, for the longest time, was traditionally portrayed as sort of a short, very heavy-set lady, which was pretty groundbreaking given in superhero comics. Normally, everybody in superhero comics looks like a model. But as we've seen, she's played by was it Angela Bassett or somebody like that? Was her in Green Lantern? I know she was. Oh, jeez, I'm totally blanking on the lady who played her on Smallville, and I was just reading that earlier. But of course, the more modern interpretations of Amanda Waller go for the whole thing of generally just making her look like a young, attractive lady. And, well, this is the CW, and one of their specialties is young, attractive ladies, with their other specialty being young, attractive gentlemen. Sorry, folks out there, sexy people sell. Back to life. Anyway, now, what's interesting here, of course, is that apparently Argus, or at least some aspect of the government, well, clearly Argus, I guess I should say, knows all about what Dig and Oliver have been up to as vigilantes. And apparently they don't care. Well, of course, this whole situation paves the way for a possibility of Oliver maybe ending up on Suicide Squad one day. And, apart from that, I really don't want to go into too much depth. I believe I've explained what Suicide Squad was in one of my previous videos. But just the idea that sometime down the road this season we might actually see Oliver forced to team up with China White, Bronze Tiger, and possibly even Deadshot to take down some bad guys. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. It's oh yeah, Oliver and Black Canary. Imagine that. Two or three villains and 2 heroes on Suicide Squad going off on some crazy mission for the government to take down who knows who? Possibly Hive? Well, we'll get to that in a bit. But oh man, just the possibilities of it all really have my geeky fanboy senses just going ooh. Anyway, nothing to say about Laurel this week because this is actually apparently, from what I've been reading, the first episode of the series in which she does not appear. Yeah, let's take care of the flashback stuff. Not really a whole lot to say there. I don't believe for a minute that Sarah is really working against Oliver. She's playing chess master there. And you know, if she really had genuinely betrayed Oliver at some point in the past, I think that once he got over the shock of the fact that she was alive, it would be like, hey, you betrayed me and I'm angry about it. Instead, as soon as he gets over his shock, Oliver is like, Sarah, let me help you. So, yeah, this is clearly a fake out. Now, this brings me to one of the real downs of this episode, and this is the whole thing of what's going on with Slade and Shadow. And some people have been talking about maybe Slade being into Shadow for a while now, and I was kind of hoping the show wouldn't go that way. And it's just like, yeah, the show is going that way. If this is ultimately what drives Oliver and Slade apart, all it does is make like Slade look like a petty, jealous dick. Like, yes, Slade, the pretty girl chose the other guy over you, and this is what you turn into a supervillain over? Holding Oliver responsible for your disfiguring injuries would make much more sense. Now, as Arrow is generally set in what is clearly going in the direction of becoming a superhero universe, we're not going to talk about the scientific inaccuracies of people doing stem cell research in the 1940s. I mean, I'm not really an expert on the history of molecular biology, but I know enough about science to know people didn't even realize that, one, they didn't even confirm that DNA was a factor in heredity until the 1950s, and it wasn't even until 1953 that they found out that DNA was the old double helix. So, yeah. But they do mention that the Super Soldier Serum, and that's what I'm going to call it, despite that being a Marvel reference, gave people the objective was to give people enhanced strength and regenerative abilities, which incidentally are basically the powers that Deathstroke has in the comics. Now, what was interesting is that in the cave we saw a guy with like a really screwed up brain, you know, big old brain skull thing. For a long time in the comics, it was actually established that one of Deathstroke's powers was that he had the ability to use 90% of his brain. You know, this basically turning his brain into a battle computer. Of course, that's rooted in the extraordinarily erroneous assumption that humans only use 10% of their brain. That's absolutely positively not true. We genuinely do use the vast majority of our brains. I think the comics have since that fact became more general public knowledge, have kind of backed off on that. But if you are familiar with the comics, you probably noticed that the burns on Slade's face are consistent with the side of his face where the Deathstroke mask is completely covered. So yeah, let me see here. Just looking at my notes here. Let's get into sorry, my brain. Okay, so anyway, let's kind of get into more of the nuts and bolts of this episode. First of all, one thing I noticed was it was really hilarious to see Oliver criticizing Felicity on being bad at making up excuses. Oliver, you're Mr. I ran out of sports bottles and my coffee shop is in a bad neighborhood. the fact that you suck at making up excuses is one of the big reasons that Felicity was ultimately pretty much able to put together what was going on with you as being the vigilante. So, yeah, dude, you're not really in a position to criticize. Now, let me see here. One thing I do have to say is that I'm really, really pleased that this is a Dig episode. This is really something that's been overdue for Dig for a long, long time. And, what I really like about this episode is that it proves that John Diggle is a character who can support an episode that is about him. Now, he was actually been recently introduced into the actual DC comics. I'm not too familiar with what that version of the character is like, but that is a testament to just the real faith that this show and the people at DC have in the character of John Diggle. And so here, another testament to him being a great character, and I'm just really excited that they're willing to put this much trust in characters that are not from the DC universe. It shows that they have confidence in this new and original elements that the show has created. And of course, this is old hat for DC. Elements from like the 1950s Superman TV show eventually crept into the comics. Elements of Smallville have cropped up in the DC universe. I believe there's actually an official DC universe version of Chloe Sullivan, for example. Smallville basically is what introduced Lionel Luthor to the DC universe. He is in fact now established as Lex Luthor's father. So again, this is just really cool. John Diggle's a great character, and it's awesome that he finally got an episode that's really all about him. And the whole thing of, she's his wife, really? I was completely floored by this. I just didn't see it coming. And I love when shows do that. It's like, wait, what? I mean, of course, this is the sort of thing the comics have been doing for a long, long time, too. But, yeah. And then we see this side of, Dig, where he says, we really couldn't be together when we didn't have a war to fight. And this really kind of gives you some insight into both their personalities. And it also really shows you that Dig, when he probably first entered the scene on the show, was probably actually a rather lonely person. And that now he's got Oliver, somebody who fills that comrade in arms role. And then he's got Felicity, who's, Felicity's kind of like that, your oddball cousin, or your goofy sister, or whoever. That quirky person in your life that, you might kind of shake your head at them a little bit, but you're just like, man, you're kind of a goofball, but I love you anyway. And we all need that person in our life. And, well, let's be completely honest. We're all probably are that person in other people's lives at some point. And we'll be talking some more about Felicity in just a minute. Let me see here. Not really a huge amount to say about Oliver's Russian buddy. It's been mentioned before that his name counterpart in the comic books is KG Beast. Kind of a reoccurring mid-level Batman villain. I mean, he certainly is portrayed as a reasonably interesting character, and this, of course, brings to head a lot of the stuff that's been established before in terms of Oliver's connection to the Bratva, which I think is really actually quite cool. I hope they continue to play around with that more, because it certainly is an interesting element. Anyway, oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention. Have you noticed that the captain of the Amazo, the big scary black dude, is the guy that played the Haitian on Heroes? That's kind of cool. Anyway, so let's get into, what I think most people are talking about in regards to this episode. And don't you worry, we'll be talking about Deadshot too, but we're going to save him for a little bit later. And of course, that is the Felicity. Okay, now again, I need to reiterate that I don't really do the shipper thing, so I don't really consider myself to have a dog in this fight. I'm just simply not above riffing shippers a little bit. Anyway, so folks of that persuasion are probably now frantically creating their Olicity music videos set to Taylor Swift's "You Belong to Me" and uploading them to YouTube at a rate I don't even want to comprehend. And Tumblr. Well, I think there are some fans of that pairing on Tumblr. But anyway, let's kind of get right into it. One thing that I like about this whole thing with what's going on this episode is that it's very genuine. That's seen at the end. I mean, even for me, somebody who doesn't really have a dog in that fight or do the shipper thing, that was really heartbreaking to watch, because it's Felicity basically saying you'd rather be intimate with someone you hate than try and pursue a relationship with someone who genuinely cares about you and wants your best interests at heart. Now granted, their relationship wasn't quite as developed when Oliver was dating McKenna Hall, but I don't recall Felicity having a problem with that. And why should she? McKenna Hall genuinely cared about Oliver. She was a good person. She was a brave person who, stood up for what was right and got shot for it. Now, Huntress, yeah, well, we all remember how that went. And I don't believe I remember Felicity being particularly enthusiastic about that relationship either. But here we've got Isabel Rochov, someone who's basically came into Oliver's life to destroy his company. Someone who has, until this episode, basically treated Oliver with contempt. I mean, granted, Oliver really isn't qualified to run a major corporation. He never did get that MBA, but seriously. And the whole thing of Isabel, okay, now it was cool when Isabel, obviously saw through Oliver's facade and was like, no, you're not who you pretend to be. And it was actually interesting when she's like, you know what, we're actually a little bit alike. That made her character interesting. But then it just turned into, I'm a little bit lonely and I've had some booze. Let's go bang. But remember what was said by that assassin guy a couple episodes ago? The child of Ra's al Ghul commands your return. Now, if you know the comics, who's Ra's al Ghul's child? Well, his daughter is Talia Al Ghul, recently highlighted in the last Batman movie. Now, she's not by any means Ra's al Ghul's only child. But if you say this to, somebody in the DC universe, the child of Ra's al Ghul, well, if they know superheroes and supervillains, the first person who's going to come to mind is Talia Al Ghul. And when she's not been doing, daddy's little villain thing, Talia has been known to work as a high-powered businesswoman. In fact, in the comics, she actually took over Lex Luthor's company, LexCorp, for a while. And remember her at the end of the last episode of last season? We get a lady who we never see receiving a somewhat ominous message. And I've previously talked about how, Malcolm Merlin's Destroy the Glades plan would, on a small-scale level, fit into exactly the sort of thing that Ra's al Ghul is all about. So, that raises some interesting possibilities. Maybe Oliver is not the only person who's more than he seems. And another thing about Isabel is that she talks about how, it's really difficult for me as a woman to really climb the ladder in the business world. And then she goes out and pretty much immediately starts degrading Felicity, who's also a woman trying to make it in the business world. Well, actually, Felicity's more a woman trying to make it in the tech world, but still, close enough for Jazz. And she also sort of goes in there with the assumption that Felicity got her job by sleeping with Oliver. At the very least, that's kind of hypocritical. Now, to be 100% fair, though, Felicity went from apparently IT girl of no particular rank to the CEO's personal assistant in a span of about a year, probably less than. That's a pretty high jump up the ladder. And here it also sort of shows that I was right, and this actually is a rather big boost for Felicity's career, even if she herself chooses not to see it that way. So yeah, and of course, it does strike me as being a little naive that neither Oliver or Felicity seem to have realized that but people would probably be speculating that they were banging, and that this was a factor in Felicity's jump to the top office. I mean, come on, guys, you're adults. But anyway, what this all brings to a head is, of course, that scene where Felicity says to him, you'd rather be with someone, you should be with somebody who cares about you and all that other fun stuff. And man, you gotta give it to Steve Amell and Emily Rickards. Just the looks on their faces during all this, it says so much. And of course, Oliver has to say to her, the life I lead, I can't really afford to get close to someone that I would genuinely care about. Oliver, didn't you kiss Laurel not that long ago? Just saying, man, just saying. So yeah, I do like that the way this is handled. It shows that Felicity and Oliver, I mean, Felicity having a crush on Oliver is not exactly news, but here we see that Oliver has probably almost certainly at least looked at Felicity and considered the possibility. And what he says does make sense, but life is short, and is really being Oliver Queen's girlfriend really going to put her in that much more danger? Then again, people do tend to break into Oliver Queen's house to try and kill him or somebody who's there an awful lot. In fact, that's happened several times in the last year or in some months in the show. Yeah, I mean, people have tried to kill Oliver, they've tried to kill his mom, they've tried... Yeah, it's actually dangerous to be Oliver Queen's girlfriend. Anyway, this episode also gives us some more insight into, of all people, Deadshot as a character. He previously had said, the only reason that he wouldn't kill Dig when Dig was completely at his mercy is nobody's paying me. And I pointed out what a ridiculous idea that was. But here, it seems that Deadshot has at least been rethinking his worldview a little bit. When he asks Diggle, what's to keep you from killing me at this point? And Dig says, honor. It's really interesting that Deadshot really believes that Dig is telling the truth, and of course Dig is. He has that great little line about how you can't switch honor on and off like a switch. And of course, this is the only reason that Dig just can't kill him right then and there. Of course, Dig probably could have just kneecapped Deadshot and left him for the Russian authorities, who would have either killed him or thrown him back in the gulag, where he would have almost certainly died anyway. Just saying, Dig, just saying. But it is Dig's honor that gets him that little piece of information. Hive. Which he later looks up on his ex-wife's phone. I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be her phone. I guess Bing is the official Argus search engine. Now, how he knew that to put Hive as some sort of an acronym is beyond me. But anyway, if you're not familiar with the Hive in the comics, they're just sort of... they've actually had quite a few incarnations of various fashions. A lot of the time, Hive are these sort of guys who were servants of a villainess called Queen Bee, who's basically a lady with mind control powers. Another version of it was Hive, were basically sort of anarchists. I think that was the Devin Grayson version of them. And another version of Hive was them as basically an academy for teenage supervillains with Brother Blood as the head master. Now, that incarnation actually came from the Teen Titans cartoon from a couple of years back. Now, we've not seen any established connection between Hive and Brother Blood, but it's hard not to wonder. And it's interesting that what's going on with Ivo and the Super Soldier Serum, and the evil research by the Imperial Japanese military. I mean, pretty clearly, this is going along the lines of being able to introduce superpowers into the Arrow universe. I think that's pretty much unquestionably where this is going. And doing all of this, raises some interesting points, because if superpowers come about because of World War II atrocities and the things that Professor Ivo does, which are obviously not good, that means that any superhero who gets these powers is basically dealing with their powers as fruit of the poison tree. I mean, how do you deal with that? It's like, I got these powers, but only because terrible atrocities were committed. And that gives you a great motivation to go out there and try and, sort of make amends. It's like, I have been given this good thing that came from this terrible thing. I need to try and use that to, balance the scales. But anyway, I think that covers everything that I had for this episode. So I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.